A railroad in Kenya, power plant in the Ivory Coast, housing projects in Rwanda. We've brought you numerous stories of major infrastructure projects happening all across Africa. But although some countries are investing billions to improve their transportation, housing and energy needs, the continent remains far behind where it needs to be.
Africa actually has a huge amount of infrastructure deficit, and it's roughly about $100 billion of deficit, for which there's about $50 billion that's available.
According to Ernst & Young, Africa will need to spend about $90 billion every year for the next decade to address its infrastructure needs. The head of the African Development Bank says that deficit hurts economic growth.
Today Africa loses roughly about 4 to 5% of its GDP because of weak infrastructure. You can't connect countries that are landlocked to the ports. It also means that it takes you a long time for your goods and services to actually get out to the global market, which is actually a huge disadvantage. And this is the reason why we at the African Development Bank are just investing massively in infrastructure.
Adesina says his organization invested almost $2 billion last year in Africa's power sector alone. Big investments like that are needed because, according to Deloitte, African governments fund less than 30% of their major construction projects.
Government has sought to finance infrastructure development over the years, primarily because government sees it as a public good. But the downside is that government then realizes that it will never have the revenue base to be able to lead infrastructure development financing. So we've re-engineered our thinking about financing infrastructure to have it become more private sector led.
Ghana's Trade and Industry Minister says his country has an annual financing gap of more than $2 billion a year. The government is now working to entice more foreign investment.
The goal in the medium term is to make Ghana the most attractive place and the most business-friendly economy in Africa. So that means that we are looking at our peers, and we are looking at the likes of Mauritius, Rwanda, Kenya, Senegal, even Benin, to see what they're doing and whether we can do better than that to make sure we can attract investors.
The president of Mozambique is also trying to appeal to foreign investors. He says 80% of his country relies on farming, and that industry has many infrastructure needs.
Preciso infraestruturas e os investimentos que irão a Moçambique.
We need the infrastructure, and we are seeking foreign investment precisely to build dams and reservoirs, for irrigation, to bring new technologies not for the production of 1 hectare, but at scale. In fact, I can summarize that we have set 4 priorities in Mozambique: agriculture, energy, tourism, and infrastructure. Infrastructure sustains agriculture through transportation, for commerce, and that's everything for us.
For some companies, Africa's infrastructure deficit presents opportunities. Caterpillar, which specializes in construction equipment, announced a $1 billion investment in the continent last year.
For us, this investment is being spread over a 5-year period starting last year in 2016. And what we're expecting is that the gap is going to be closing on this $50 billion for infrastructure spend in Africa. And so once the money starts to flow, the capability to actually put the infrastructure in place has to exist. And Caterpillar plays a crucial role in bringing that to bear.
But money isn't all that's needed.
Well, clearly, I think that skilled labor is really one of the biggest challenges that we face. And as I travel around the continent, leaders and ministers often ask me, help us with skills.
Nós temos que assegurar a liderança.
We must strengthen the leadership. We need good leadership. Leadership with good policies, good governing practices, and transparency.
I don't believe that money is a problem. I believe that getting the right projects that are bankable, that's the real issue. There's pools of capital that's out there in the world. Pools of savings, roughly about $5 trillion of savings pool every year. If Africa is able to attract just 1% of that, it will close its infrastructure gap.
PwC, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, predicts global infrastructure spending to be more than $9 trillion a year by 2025. So Africa won't be the only region looking to finance big projects, but the continent has a lot more digging to do before infrastructure is no longer an issue. Time for a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to introduce you to a man who is trying to pull off a huge infrastructure project in one of Africa's smaller countries. Don't go away. He's a chemical engineer by trade and got his training in France. This Benin native served as chairman of the board of governors for OPEC and had many other civic roles in the oil and mining sector before creating his company Petrolin in London 25 years ago. Today, the group specializes in oil and gas exploration and production with oil projects in 5 African countries. And now he's setting broader goals for his company. One potential challenge for your business on the horizon is that, 50, 60, 70 years from now, many are hoping that Africa becomes more dependent on renewable sources of energy. How do you handle that? Given that your primary business is in hydrocarbons, is in oil, how do you handle that?
I am in oil business for more than 40 years. Each time they told us, oh, the future of oil is finished. You have to make alternative source of energy. I say, that is the thinking. For me, my evolution is linked to what I see on the ground. If I have the production, I produce it, but I don't forget also diversification, which is not only in oil, in terms of revenue. We were involved in telecommunication also.
You've got infrastructure?
Yeah, infrastructure, which is our main project today. We are constructing a dry port in Parakou in Benin, which is already finished. We are constructing a petroleum, mineral, and commercial port.
This is all part of the backbone project.
Yes, all is a backbone project, and with a big synergy with what the train, the railway can bring as capacity of transport of all these big mineral resources in Africa.
And as you develop the infrastructure, transportation, you mentioned ports, obviously, railways, what sort of impact do you expect that will have on economic growth in certain African countries?
First, impact on the population. You know that many villages, when the train come to the village develop because they can produce, they can go on agriculture and have a secure way to transport their production to the big towns. Only train can do that for the heavy transportation we need to do to develop Africa. When you import cement to a very far village to build what you have to build, a plant or construct a house and things like that, you need something good like railway for very heavy transport. But on top of that, each village have the opportunity to sell all their production to the big cities, in Africa. Then if you are in your village and your banana, your oranges, you can sell it all together to a big village, you are making business without leaving your village.
And then what about using infrastructure to actually attract more foreign direct investment?
Our part is to put our part of money. Because if your international partner see that yourself, you put your own money, you will be careful on how the investment is properly used. It's the reason why I have 2 principles: transparency on how you manage, on how you spend money, and good partnership. Because, of course, internationally, you should choose also the good partners,